We gotta go to the bullpen. Welcome to the Highland Bullpen, the all-new podcast bringing America's pastime to Scotland's shores. It doesn't matter if you're a Hall of Famer heading for Cooperstown or you're fresh out of the minor leagues. This is the podcast for you. Hello listeners, wherever you are, and a warm welcome to the Highland Bullpen, where you're getting the very best baseball opinions from our four lads from Scotland. Alan, Dave Jnr. and Yorkshire Dave, it's been another fantastic week in baseball. Maybe not fantastic for all of our teams, but this season is really hotting up as we enter the final 4 weeks. So to kick us off, or to lead us off, I should say, the Seattle Mariners, they've been teasing me, tempting me all season, but I reckon our wildcard hopes were finally killed off yesterday when we managed to blow a lead in the ninth inning and eventually lose 5-4 to the Astros. And that was one of those matches and one of those series, that 3-game series where we really needed a sweep to keep our kind of hopes alive of winning the AL West. And it didn't quite happen for us. We were kind of beaten out of sight in the first game of the series, 11-2. I had a chance to emerge with a series win, but that 5-4 defeat was a real heartbreaker. And I guess having won so many close games all season, the Mariners, your luck's going to run out at some point and you're going to be in the wrong end of one of those. So the Astros look nailed on for division title. And looking at the various divisions, I think it'll be a stretch for the Mariners to make their way into wildcard contention. But wildcard contention has not been something that's been troubling the Detroit Tigers for a while, Alan, but I know you're still following them closely and already looking forward to the next MLB season. So how have the Tigers been getting on?
It's an odd thing at this stage. You look forward to next season, but I guess that's how it is with the teams that struggle. You always have a little bit of hope something's coming down the road. There was a while, a few weeks back, I was probably talking optimistically about the Tigers getting to 500. I think we looked at their August schedule and thought, yeah, they could do something good and spectacular here. It's not really come to fruition. The young lads coming in, pitching, have done well, but missed over a season. You're going to miss Matthew Boyd and Spencer Turnbull with long-term injuries. So that's been tough for the old Tigers. We were competing, I guess, as well. When you talk about getting to 500, you're also hoping there's a point where you're going to get second place and beat the Indians into second place, but we're now 5 games behind the Indians. So it's going to take something spectacular for that to really change. And we're only 2 games ahead of the good old Royals as well. So what was looking good and what was heading towards 500, it's not really happening now, I'm afraid. So 50-50 record at home, well, 35 wins, 35 defeats. On the road, 30 wins, 40 defeats. That's probably the sign of where it's struggled. I don't know that there's probably a very simple answer to this question, but in terms of the wild cards, that then looks like the 2 wild cards in the American League will come from the same division. Is that common?
Well, in the American League, it could happen. I'm not sure about that, but I wouldn't rule out Seattle just now. Toronto's making a place. They're actually getting quite congested, but yeah, there are sort of 4 teams in. The Rays are probably going to win the division. Then it's the Yankees, Red Sox. Game and a half behind, aren't they, the Yankees? And 2 games, I think, to the good for the second wildcard spot. But Toronto's come into the game. They're only just a couple of games behind the Red Sox, I think. Yeah, and I say the Seattle still in with a chance, and of course Oakland is still there. So 20 odd games to go, isn't there? So it can still happen.
It can. No, I appreciate that, Yorkshire Dave, but I think it would take both the Yankees and the Red Sox. So as I mentioned last week, they do play each other in one of the last series of the year. So obviously somebody will be losing in those games. So there is the opportunity, I guess, but it's kind of last chance saloon, I think, for both Toronto and Seattle. They really have to have one of those kind of 9-1 type series of go on one of those stretches. But yeah, it's not impossible, but certainly very comfortable are the White Sox there. And Dave Jr., last 10 games, you're 7-3, so it must be reassuring to see you're keeping up that momentum. You keep chalking up the victories, so presumably you want to keep that going and not lose any of that ahead of the postseason.
Yeah, thanks, Richard. I think it looks more comfortable than it feels just now. 7-3 doesn't really feel quite reflective of where things have been. We've lost really 3 out of our 5 starting pitchers just now, and the bullpen's not been doing too great, and we've started suffering a couple of injuries out in the outfield as well. So again, the great luxury of that is that Tony La Russa he can manage the squad, and he's been able to bring some guys up from the minor leagues to help out. And one of those guys last night, Jimmy Lambert. So it was a real touching moment for him. He's been in. I think he was drafted by the White Sox 5 or 6 years ago. Spent a few years in the lower leagues, as players tend to do, and then suffered. He had to go through Tommy John surgery. So I think that's always, from what I can tell, it's really debilitating for pitchers, and a lot of them don't make it back. So he was called up last night to play, a really, really good Oakland A's team just now, who are still in that wild card mix along with yourselves. And he got his first ever win last night, and he was really emotional. They said after the game, the beer shower that he went through might very well have been one of the biggest any in the squad had seen for quite some years. So they must think of him really well. But it's a lot of these guys that have performed for the White Sox in the absence of some established names. They've came through this year, so last night could have been really tricky. Taking on the A's. Sorry for the noise in the background. Not the ice cream man. These guys have come up to the big leagues and played their part, which is fantastic. And as you said, it's not that you're trying to coast now to the end of the season, because there's that second seed spot up for grabs, and it means that at the moment it looks like the White Sox will play the Astros in the postseason. And going to the Astros to play 4 games is a lot different than hosting them for 4 games. It's quite a different stadium when you look at it. We haven't done too well there over the years. I think the turf is artificial. You would rather have that home game advantage. Like all the teams in postseason, they'll be doing the very best. So there's absolutely something there to fight for. Houston have got a really tough run in September, so I'm hoping that they can drop. I was going to say a few points, but I'm hoping they can lose a few games along the way. I'm not sure if you guys are playing them at any point. But our magic number, which I may rely on the 3 of you to bail me out on here, the magic number for Chicago sits at 15. And that's, from what I'm led to believe, I think that's the number of wins you need to then clinch the title. However, with Cleveland, I think if Cleveland, who are our nearest rivals, if they drop a game and White Sox win in the same night, it's almost like a 6-pointer. You might pick up 2 games in the one night. But as that, again, I can't claim to be a huge White Sox fan that's been embedded in things over the years, but I'm sure that all those fans will be looking forward to clinching a divisional title and perhaps going on from there to try and get the league pennant as well. So, no, it's really good times, Richard.
Excellent, great stuff. And for the Red Sox as well, Yorkshire Dave, it's been a high-scoring couple of days. You're on the wrong end of a 21-run shootout with the Rays yesterday. On Monday, as we record here tonight. And you another 19 runs in the most recent game today, and unfortunately the Sox only claimed 7 of those as well. So your pitching struggling to contain the Rays, I guess, Yorkshire Dave, but they've got some real offense as well. So perhaps no great surprise.
Oh yeah, the good news for Boston is that after tonight, they do not have to play the Tampa Bay Rays again in the regular season. The Red Sox has a losing record against the Rays. I think they're 7-11 just now, and obviously they play them again tonight. One game to play. So, and this was after Boston swept the Rays in the second series of the season back in April, 3-game series. So really, they've had a tough time of it. The relentless Rays, as I'm calling them. Actually, I think the Red Sox had shown some really terrific resilience recently. Given their much publicised COVID issues, they'd made a few moves and juggled the bullpen as best they can. They rallied to split a 4-game series away at Tampa after losing the first 2, and then they won the first 2 games against Cleveland back in Fenway. So they had 4 in a row, and then the other night, that game you mentioned that finished 11-10 to Tampa. Boston was 7-1 ahead in that game, and there was an unfortunate defensive play, which I said it was counted as an error, but it was one of those really sunny days. I think it was an afternoon game, and the centre fielder, I won't name him because he's probably my favourite Red Sox player, and it was the sort of I think the bases were loaded, and it looks like one of those sort of almost not exactly a routine play, but got his glove to it, but the sun got in his eyes and he missed it, and it went sort of horribly wrong. And last night, actually, is it 12-7? That actually flatters the Red Sox. I think they were down 1 and got 5 or 6 runs in the last innings. So you've got to give Tampa their due. They look a really good team, good hitting team, and all round pitching is not bad. So yeah, I think that. So yeah, having said all that, the Red Sox are still in it there with 2 games. They could have gone ahead of the Yankees had they won that game. They were 7-1 up when I think, and the Yankees themselves, I think they've lost their last 4, including 2 against Baltimore, surprisingly. So it's getting quite congested, I think. I think Red Sox have only got 21 games to go. So, and they've got some tough fixtures. The 3-game series in Seattle. Played Dave's White Sox as well in the South Side. Chicago. And also we've got 3 games against the Yankees. So there's a lot to happen yet. But I'm still happy where we are, in with a chance, and I'm not pointing any criticism at the manager or the players. I think they're in a pretty good position considering everything, and they're still looking pretty good for the playoffs.
Yeah, and I have to say, obviously the bullpen bros, with 3 of us, our teams are going up against each other this week, with the White Sox facing the Red Sox and the Red Sox facing the Mariners as well. We clearly need to get a neutral opinion on this, and that only leaves one of the bros. Alan?
I think you're probably right, Richard. I think the wild card places are going to be the Yankees and the Red Sox. I assume that means they then play each other in the wild card playoff. A big game to start the playoffs, if that's what it is. The White Sox aren't under any threat, and I hope this year they manage to go a wee bit further than last year's entry into the playoffs. The Mariners, I've noticed a bit of it through following the fantasy league team, and I've probably got to know your teams a wee bit better. I think a few of our pitchers have struggled in the last sort of week or so. Some high numbers have been posted against him in the old stats line. I'd be intrigued to know from aficionados of baseball, does this happen towards the end of the season? Do your players, there's a lot of injuries out there, but do players, are they carrying knocks? Does it get harder for them as the season goes on? Do they get a bit more jaded or tired? Do they feel a bit of extra pressure then as well as we get to this situation? And perhaps if they're playing some of the weaker teams, and Dave was mentioning there the Orioles, a couple of wins against the Yankees, are the weaker teams a bit less inhibited? Are they ready to go? Are they blooding a few players? So Dave, you might have some thoughts on that.
Yeah, certainly Cora, the Red Sox manager, he does rest players. I presume other teams do. I haven't really kept tabs on that. But for instance, one of the games, I can't remember whether it was last night or the night before, Rafi Devers was given the day off. And he did say, because I think he has got criticism. You get criticised if you lose a game and you've done something that looks a bit different and you've lost the game. It's okay if you rest somebody and you win. You've been very smart. If you rest Martinez at DH and you lose the game, and you all of a sudden you get criticism. But he says he's giving Devers a day off, and that's his last day off till the end of the regular season. But he did bring him in. He pinched hit for him. But that's all he did. He took him straight out again. So he didn't field. He just came in. He didn't actually get a hit, but he came in at position when there was guys on base, and he's obviously a great hitter. But so he came in for one bat on his day off. But it is interesting to see how they do. If you're in contention, though, I think the run-in, there'll be very few. They will stretch it, and you might see the ace pitcher pitching either more often or more pitching more pitches, going deeper into games, and because you're not saving yourself or anything. You've got to get to the playoffs, and then it's you're in the mix.
I think you make a good point there as well, Yorkshire Dave, about the kind of the timing. Timing's everything in baseball, and actually one of the teams who I really thought would do well this season, but who haven't, but have hit form at the right time, are the New York Mets. I don't know if you saw that Pete Alonso became the second, reached 100 home runs, became the second fastest in history to reach 100 home runs there when the Mets beat the Marlins just the other night there, and they're now only a couple of games off the division, because that's a really tight division. At the top of the NL East there, the Braves, who were leading, fallen away quite a bit. Their form's not been great. Phillies are strong, but the Mets are only a game behind there as well. And I think Pete Alonso's a hell of a player. I mean, 100 home runs in only just over 300 games is pretty impressive going. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, he was in the home run, wasn't he? He's some committed individual.
Absolutely. So I'll be interested to see if the Mets do end up just kind of timing the run perfectly. I guess it's like in athletics when you see a big pack and somebody, or in horse racing, Yorkshire Dave, which I know is something you enjoy yourself, when a horse will just stay in the right position, steer clear of trouble, and then just in that final furlong, just find a space and go for it. I wonder if the Mets might just be that team, which would give them a real momentum boost going into the postseason.
Yeah, I hope they make it. Obviously, I think we've spoke about this before, that when they were top of the division, that they had some unusual numbers. I think you mentioned it yourself, that their runs scored were amongst the lowest, wasn't it, or something like that. Certainly. Like, their starting pitching was outstanding with DeGrom doing his stuff, and then he was still injured, isn't he? I think so. They're doing well without their. If anyone is an ace, it's him. But they've they have invested big, haven't they, in the team? And I think they need to finish strong and get there to to keep it going. And hopefully, then I don't know how badly injured DeGrom is, but yeah, it would be great to see them in it and him pitching in the playoffs.
Yeah, and of course Stephen Cohen, their owner, he was the one that knocked Allen's man off the top spot as the richest owner in baseball. So, given the amount he's invested in the Mets this season, I think making that postseason has still got to be the aim. Now, Yorkshire Dave mentioned unusual numbers there, and I think your colleague and fellow bullpen bro Dave Jr. has a very unusual and possibly unique number that he'd like to tell us about.
Yeah, so this was brought to my attention by my son, who again is quite a fleeting interest in baseball when it suits, like most kids. So back in 1951, if you can cast your mind that far back, and I won't make any jokes this week, the St. Louis Browns were going through a real sticky spell. And I think their owner at that point, I recognise his name, I'm not sure if you guys do, Bill Veeck. So at that moment in time, St. Louis Browns, who I'm sure have evolved into a kind of different name at this point, they were the worst team in baseball at that moment in time. They were really crying out for crowds, for that investment coming back into the team. And Mr. Veeck must have been a little bit of a pioneer, just thinking outside the box. So there was a game against Alan's Detroit Tigers. I don't know if you were there or not, Alan. But the game's playing out throughout the course of the evening.
I was celebrating my 18th, so I wasn't old enough.
When all of a sudden, the manager of St. Louis opts to make a change and put in a pinch hitter. So, who strides up to the plate but Eddie Gaedel, Gaedel. There's a little bit of recognition in Dave's face here. I don't know if he knew Eddie in case at all, or if he was Eduardo, I'm not too sure. So the reason that he strutted up to the plate is that Eddie stood at 3'7" and weighed in at a mere 60 pounds. And that day he wore, they couldn't find him a jersey, but he wore one of the Bat Boy, the Bat Boys jerseys, the ball boy, effectively. And the whole idea behind this is a bit of a publicity stunt from the owner of the club. Is, again, for those of you not in the know with baseball, and I'll probably get this wrong, but to the casual fan, if you watch a baseball game live, generally on TV, there's a floating rectangle on the screen to show you where the ball would generally be considered a strike, the strike zone. Now, again, this comes back to umpires and you can get frustrated with them at times, but the incredible job they do to gauge what a strike is and what isn't. So that strike zone is roughly the width of the plate and also goes from the batter's, I believe it's the shoulders, roughly around about the shoulder area, to the waist, around about the belt of the batter. I'm sure one of the guys will correct me if I'm wrong. So it's nice for us as the kind of casual viewer on TV to see this box floating there, but the referee doesn't. So the umpire doesn't. He doesn't see a floating box. They don't see curveballs coming in and gauging at what point a slider hits the deck. So these guys do a great job. But anyway, coming back to the story, the idea is that Eddie's strike zone, because going from his shoulder to his waist is a whole lot shorter than for the likes of us. So he was given explicit instructions from the owner, do not swing. And apparently there were some threats made for his life. Do not swing, we'll shoot you. We need you to get the tiniest stance possible, because how hard is it going to be for a pitcher to get a strike? So lo and behold, 4 balls later, literally 4 balls, 4 foul balls, and poor Eddie is walked to first base. So it would have been so interesting to see the reaction of both teams, of the crowd, of the umpires. I'm sure things would have been pretty heated on the night. At first base, Eddie was taken out of the game and replaced by a pinch runner, given that his wee legs might not have made second base very, very quickly. The next day, word spread to the MLB and they were furious. They were absolutely off their rockers, and his contract was voided the next day. Apparently, there's parts of that story lend itself to how contracts now need to be signed in advance. They need to be approved by the commissioner. Now, I'm sure he or she has a team to do this for them, but contracts need to be approved in advance because of what happened with Eddie. So I thought that's a fantastic record. It means that he's got a 1,000% record of getting on base. So I found that really, really quite interesting. Apparently, he's got a spot at the Hall of Fame. His jersey is there for everyone to see. But I'm not sure if, Dave, have you heard about Eddie's story before? Or have you came across it? Any thoughts?
Do you know what, Dave? I have, and that was absolutely fantastic how you put that together. It is strange that this last week or so I've been working on something that was going to mention to the podcast on a similar subject, and because I started off watching baseball in the early 90s and getting interested in it, and yourselves, you start trying to learn the rules, and the strike zone was very interesting. And I had it in my mind that somebody had said or had read somewhere that in the past, because the strike zone is personal to the player, that unscrupulous owners had employed, shall we say, gentlemen of diminutive stature before. But I didn't know the story. And then it came back to me recently when I was watching a game. It was Red Sox and Yankees, and they were talking about the strike zone. I think it was on the NESN. I think it was Dennis Eckersley, the great Red Sox pitcher, who was talking about the strike zone in particular. And Aaron Judge was at bat, and he says, "Well, it's a big strike zone." I said, "Yeah, that's what's been bothering me for ages." And this, like you say, this superimposed rectangle which hovers above home plate, and if I'm right in my memory, the bottom part of the strike zone is the bottom of the batsman's knee. I think until quite recently it's changed quite a lot over the years. I think it was until quite recently, the 90s or not that long ago, it was the top of the knee. But the top part of the strike zone is, I think, the midpoint, and I'm doing this from memory, the midpoint from the top of the shoulders, or maybe the oxters, as we say in Scotland, and the midway point between that and the top of the pants, like the belt. And it's in the batsman's normal at-bat stance. So, and I thought, well, I don't have I'm going to maybe ask you to do something, Dave, when you next watch the game, because I'm pretty sure you've got quite a large screen TV. We've just got like a pretty, straightforward. It's almost not much bigger than the laptop. But I thought I'm going to test this because I don't notice the strike zone changing for the batter. But so I actually, sadly, I got a ruler out, froze the frame when Aaron Judge was batting, right? And I think, again, I'm going from memory, I sort of had started making notes about this and I think it was like 25 millimeters on my screen. And then other batters came in, and Brett Gardner, Aaron Judge is 6'8", isn't he, I think? And he's got quite an upright stance as well. So Brett Gardner came in. I think he's quite a bit small and crouches a bit, and his was like 23 millimeters. The across part is the same for any batter because it just goes up vertical from. So yes, and I did look up this thing, and I saw not in as much great detail as Dave has just given us, but I did see that story about Eddie Gaedel. So, yeah, it's great stuff, Dave.
That's a terrific piece there, Dave Jr. I've got to ask, surely Eddie should have been a shortstop? I'll get my quote.
Yeah, I was just going to say thanks for correcting me on the kind of strike zone parameters, Dave. Something that I did hear them talk about in commentary. So apparently that box that you see on TV, not that it matters to the umpires or the players on the pitch, but for the viewer, apparently the box that does appear, it is based, as Dave said, on your personal size, I suppose, but also the actual box that they show on TV is taken from your last 60 at-bats. So that's how, and you can actually sometimes see it resizing on the TV if you watch kind of closely enough. But it will be not just, because they don't get every player in the studio beforehand, shove a measure against them and see exactly where it sits. So that is taken from each of your last 60 at-bats on a rolling sort of 60 basis to then give the viewer an idea of what the umpire is looking for. So it's not an exact strike zone. It's just to give you an idea. Yeah. That's what the umpire's looking at.
Oh, that's excellent, Dave, because this is, I didn't find that explanation when I was looking, and that's great. That's put me at rest. And then, it's not definitive. Obviously, they don't go to it like they're doing cricket or tennis or something like that. You can't sort of appeal against a strike. And I did see something on, I follow the Jerry Reamy's sort of Facebook page, and somebody there, I didn't see the answer, but it's obviously people do bother about it. People who followed baseball all their lives. Somebody had just said, how does the home plate umpire call a low strike? How does he see the low strike? He's crouching behind the the catcher, and I guess they use their experience and their knowledge, and but this is we've talked about this before as well. The framing art of a catcher, when they catch it, sort of, it's obviously low, but they just move. As they catch the ball, they move their glove up into the strike zone to try and influence the umpire.
It's interesting you mentioned that, Dave. Something that I found from the commentary teams, I've listened to a few of them now, mainly the Chicago guys, but everyone is really complimentary of the umpires. And to back that up further, quite often the commentary teams will say, if the fans or the players start getting on the umpire's back, particularly about low strikes, as you said there, the commentary teams will very often say, usually it's filled with ex-players, they will say, that's not in the umpire. If you're in the fourth or fifth or sixth inning, by now the players should have gauged that the umpire has a low strike zone, and that is not up to the players should have noticed that, or they should be aware of that in the dugout to say, listen, although your strike zone's normally here, it's actually an inch lower, and that's up to the team, that's up to the players to identify that during the game. Again, it sounds quite alien to football fans. Literally moving the goalposts would be the alternate for that in our sport. You don't see that. That just doesn't happen. But for the strike zone in baseball, get a handle of what your umpire is doing early on. Again, like a referee in a football game, does the referee come out and give a yellow card after the first 5 minutes? Or does he let the game breathe? You've got to read that umpire to see how you can play that game.
Yeah, that's a great point, Dave. And, in the era before technology and calls in cricket, certainly one of the most famous umpires around Dickie Bird, the Yorkshireman Dickie Bird, he was notorious for being very generous to batsmen. So to get a leg before wicket dismissal, which would be similar to baseball and the strike zone. So it obviously, the idea in cricket, one of the ways of getting a batsman out is to hit the three stumps that the batsman is protecting, which is akin to the strike zone. But sometimes they miss the ball and it hits their leg in front of the the stumps, and they can be given out leg before wicket. But it has to, in the umpire's opinion, be going on to hit the stump. And some of the umpires, were notoriously very defensive of the batsman, and would be very hard to get a leg before wicket decision from acknowledged as the best umpire there's ever been, Dickie Bird.
Yeah, and Dickie Bird, obviously, like yourself, Yorkshire Dave, Dickie Bird, a proud Yorkshireman from Barnsley, I believe, and he's still in the strength at the tender age of 88. He's still going strong, Dickie Bird, but he was obviously famously a regular at Headingley on many occasions, umpiring at the home of Yorkshire cricket there, Yorkshire Dave, and I believe you were yourself at Headingley recently for a different type of sporting event.
Oh, absolutely! What an amazing event it was. Headingley there's been a stadium, a rugby ground, and a cricket ground on that site since 1889, and it's seen so many great sporting events. Especially the cricket is world renowned. It was one of the great test venues, and that 1981 Ashes series. And but recently, it's just before the COVID lockdown, they needed to upgrade the facilities, and the rugby ground and the cricket ground are back to back, and the north stand of the rugby ground is also the south stand opposite the famous Kurtzell Lane end of the cricket ground. So they built a new stand there, and the facilities overlook both stadiums. So we were, my brother and I were invited to the corporate hospitality, and it's now known as Emerald Headingley, the Emerald Suite. And what an amazing world-class facility it was. But the night itself, I didn't realise just how big it was. I thought that there was going to be a 10,000 crowd there. It's transformed as boxing and does this regularly, doesn't it? I think Josh Warrington is a Leeds lad. He won the world title at Ellen Road. He's Leeds United through and through, Leeds Rhinos, Leeds lad. And this was the first time, though, that they've had boxing at Headingley, and they transformed the stadium so they had the boxing ring in the middle of the ground. And there was actually 20,000 there, and it was a raucous crowd. There's a fight, it starts at 5 o'clock. It's a great undercard. Nigel, I think you're a big boxing man yourself. You'll know Nigel Benn's son, Conor Benn, was fighting. Ireland's finest, Katie Taylor. She defended the undisputed lightweight, is it crown, I think. And then the main event was Josh Warrington. I don't think I've seen a sporting event ramped up quite the way it was. You probably, you can see it. I'll post the official release from Leeds Rhinos so that people can see it. You probably need to be from Leeds as well to really appreciate it, because he's a big Leeds United fan. He came on to, which is now adopted by Leeds Rhinos as well, the Marching On Together song, which dates back to Don Reevy's 1960s, 70s Leeds. And then you thought, wow, that is amazing. And then, as if that wasn't, you thought it got to the limit, but the volume and intensity was turned up to 11. The Kaiser Chiefs, or the Leeds band, I Predict a Riot, kicked in. And I was a little bit worried that it might be prophetic. But, it was great. Obviously, the fight itself, you can't predict what's going to happen in sport, can you? And boxing especially. And started off, he had a good first round, I think.
Yeah.
Second round was okay. But during that, in the middle of that, there was an accidental clash of heads. You could tell straight away that the young Mexican lad who had beaten him in February 2021 was really in trouble, and his corner really tried valiantly to get him back, but then there was the doctor was called in. There was a close up of him, and you could see it was a real savage cut above his left eye. He just couldn't carry on, and the rules of the tournament stated that he couldn't make a decision in favour of one boxer or the other unless it had gone 4 rounds. So they were pretty much forced to give a
technical draw, I think.
Yeah. So it was. I mean, poor old Josh Warrington was absolutely visibly upset. Mouthing "I'm sorry" to the Leeds fans. Nothing to worry about, but it was a huge disappointment, and that's at the point where I thought, oh God, is that Kaiser Chiefs song going to be pathetic? But I think the fans took it on the chin, to use a boxing, and accepted it. There was a few boos at first, but I think they realised, what could happen. It's very disappointing, but what a night it was, and I hope there's a third fight, and they get the 2 boxers get a chance to do it somewhere, maybe back at Ellen Road. I don't know.
You'd like to see that, wouldn't you? Because through no fault of their own, or through, it's not Josh Warrington's or Maurizio Lara's fault either, but through no fault of their own, they're denied that kind of huge occasion. In boxing being what it is, it takes 6, 7, 8 months, 10 months. You train, you prepare for that one night, for those 12 rounds. So it's particularly hard on the boxers involved themselves. It was a bad cut. I mean, boxing, the corner men are great at patching up cuts that you think were going to cause the fight to be stopped. But if they hadn't stopped it then, all would have happened was Warrington would have gone after it. That's exactly what you do. And they'd have to have stopped it 30 seconds later, a minute later. They definitely wouldn't have made another round with that kind of cut. But no, great to hear that. It sounds like you enjoyed your experience, at least, Yorkshire Dave, in front of you're in your native city with a crowd thoroughly behind their hometown hero.
I was very lucky as a kid growing up within earshot of Headingley, and funnily enough, yesterday visited my 2 aunties who still live in the same house as they did from the 60s and the 50s when we were growing up, and they said, they could hear all the antics going on from their house, and it is a fantastic venue, and we were all going to be there, weren't we, for a game in this year's Rugby League World Cup. Again, was it New Zealand match? I think was going to be, but obviously that's got delayed until next year. But we must get you 3 guys down to Headingley. It's one of the great sporting venues in the world. So it's pretty much unique now. I think going back, especially in Yorkshire, but there were other places, quite often you had this joint football and cricket, or rugby and cricket grounds. And Bramall Lane, Sheffield United, they still play at Bramall Lane, but previously next door was a cricket ground where Yorkshire used to play some of their home games, and likewise Bradford Park Avenue. I've been to both of them. Bradford Park Avenue was fantastic. You could actually watch the football game from the main stand and just sort of peer back, and you would see the cricket.
Wow.
Cricket game going on,
2 for the price of 1. That would suit a Yorkshireman, I'm sure.
Maybe that's what it was all about. Yeah.
Brilliant, great stuff. No, but while Josh Warrington was being denied a victory, there was no denying the golfers of Europe's Solheim Cup. Team Alan, that must have been a performance to make a golfer like yourself proud.
Yeah, fantastic entertainment. I play golf, but I love the team events, and the Ryder Cup has grown exponentially really over the last 20 years as an international sporting event. And I guess in a lot of ways we've to thank Seve for introducing the Europeans into what was a Great Britain and Ireland team against the Americans. But it's brilliant to see the Solheim Cup backing that up as well, and getting the same sort of stature and recognition. And one of the interesting comments I heard on the commentary over the weekend was somebody saying that when the commentator saying when they've gone to the Solheim Cup before, it's been 80% women watching, whereas now it's like a 50-50 split. So that's progress in terms of sport. But I think the other great element of progress, and apologies if on our baseball podcast we have any American listeners, but Europe has really started dominating these events. Now you can come and give us your views on that, because the Americans, in terms of world rankings, pretty much every time have got better players than the Europeans. But there's something happens there that our lads and lassies managed to take the trophy home. And this time they're taking it home from the wonderfully named Inverness Golf Club in Toledo. I'm not quite sure why it's named Inverness Golf Club, but our architect was Donald Ross in the early 1900s. So Donald from Dornoch, renowned golf course architect. Pinehurst would be his greatest piece of work. And the European team with their fancy golf bags. Did you happen to spot what was on the bottom of their golf bags? If you possibly weren't watching, but they had a picture of the Loch Ness Monster.
Oh, fantastic. Oh, brilliant.
I thought it was going to be an advertisement for Sports Direct or something.
Changed days, fortunately. I could tell a story about one of my friends who played on the European Tour 20, 30 years ago, and he had a particularly good round on the Friday, so his mates knew he would be on TV on the day after, and they put something rather inappropriate on the base of his bag, so he wouldn't know it was there. But when it was featured on TV, it would be there for all to see. So he's a very successful coach these days, so I'll not name him. But it was great sporting occasion. Great rookie performance from a young Irish girl, Leona Maguire, for the European team. Played all 5 games, which is very unusual. I think she had 4 wins as well, including a fantastic win in the singles. Toledo as well, interestingly, Pat Hurst, here's the baseball bit, Pat Hurst, the US captain, to help advertise the event back in June, she threw out the first pitch at a Toledo Mud Hens game. I can't find video of it because there is a suggestion that she pitched a ball with a golf club rather than actual pitching a baseball, which would have been fair enough. But the Mud Hens were actually well represented. It must be the major sports team in Toledo, but their badge was on the caddies' shirts. The badge, the logo was there on the back of on a lot of the billboards around the golf course. Probably ultimately was frightened off by Nessie, though, and it was good to see the European win captained by a Scot, Katrina Matthew. A little bit of controversy, whether you picked up on it or not. So Dave was talking about a rules incident there as well, but on the first day, Nelly Korda, one of the famous Korda sisters, both in the world top 10, their brothers in the world top 30 playing tennis, and both their parents were very successful sports folk. But she had an eagle putt, and it seemed to hang on the edge of the hole, and it wasn't obviously not going in. So I think it was Madeline Sagström, the European golfer, went and conceded the putt, picked it up and threw it back. But what she hadn't done was wait the 10 seconds. So the rules official deemed that the ball had gone in the hole. Nelly Korda was saying it was out with her hands, and the rules official had called it, so it was nothing to do with her. But the Solheim Cup and the Ryder Cup don't seem to manage to pass without a little bit of controversy. So that was one that possibly spurs the Europeans on, especially when they're in an environment which is fairly raucous, but obviously with no fans. and as much as there are a handful of fans, but obviously we can't travel from Europe to get into the States. So well done to the ladies. And I think it's in Spain in 2023. So yeah, looking forward to that one. And the Ryder Cup's actually only a few weeks away as well. Oddly, because of the pandemic, we now have the Ryder Cup and the Solheim Cup in the same year. I think that's going to continue to 2023. But then the Solheim Cup is only having a 1 year gap before their next one, so as we have them in alternate years. So just a little bit of golf with a bit of baseball and a bit of Inverness celebrity pitched in there as well.
Well, we'll leave our Dingwall celebrity to have the last word on this week's episode of the Highland Bullpen. Thank you all for listening, and we'll see you next week.